particularly when you're able to find community where, it's safe to cry, it's
Yeah.
safe to grieve, like you feel human and less like a machine in these times where uncertainty increases, ambiguity increases, things seem more complex, and there's more concern about, being able to provide for your immediate needs. Then like people do get conservative, they get afraid. Like it comes from fear, and that's a normal biological response when we're dealing with uncertainty. And it's a perception thing, right? It's really just a lot of that's to do with our like the stories that we're told, that we read, that we but also the recognition that all these things are happening at the moment, and everyone's kind of feeling it when we're able to co-regulate in a safe space with others. We're able to show up better as a as we are human for each other. And that's when we are able to play a different role, not as machines, as communal beings that we are.
Like being stubbornly human. Welcome, Pathfinders and all wandering wanderers, eager to explore paths to better tech futures together. We are Tethic's Firekeepers, Ale Isakovic and Matthew Mitka, inviting you to embark on another playful, meandering exploration around our virtual campfire. You can find more about us and ways of joining our pathfinding adventure at tethix.co/pathfinders. In our last new newsletter, we shared reflections on lives lost, mugs broken and repaired, and an invitation to give love one more chance before we collectively break under pressure beyond repair. Because it does feel like so many of us are close to our breaking point in these end times. And yet, we talk about our need to recharge as if we were mere batteries in the Matrix. Batteries running on low while also being pressured to increase our output with the help of AI companions that need no rest. Work happy with Zoom AI companion is the message we now have to stare at while waiting for another soul-draining Zoom meeting. Try the AI calendar that optimizes everyone's schedules for effortless productivity. Goes another sales pitch in an attempt to convince our exhausted bodies that salvation is just an AI assistant away. Oddly enough, we have yet to receive offers for AI companions willing to cover our rising costs of living with their magic of effortless productivity, or AI companions helping us to speak out against injustice. The more machine intelligence we use, the more machine-like we make ourselves, leaving little room for silly human things like grieving, loving, being. How do you find time for those in your optimized calendar? Aren't you tired of role-playing as a machine, expected to increase your output every quarter, schedule your existential crisis in between meetings now largely attended by AI note-takers, expected to recharge over the weekend as you watch the world you took for granted crumble? If you're listening to this episode of the Pathfinders podcast in an organic body, we invite you to take a deep breath. To shake off any stress you might be feeling right now, and to open your minds and hearts to today's guiding question. How might we stop role-playing as machines? Welcome back, Matt. So, what has your favorite promise of AI salvation been recently?
Oh, yes. Good to be back. Good to be back. As the full moon has done its thing. Salvation. Such a
greater productivity, effortless productivity, optimized output.
Yeah,
Have you been feeling that?
I'm feeling it in my body, the promise of salvation, of being able to like optimize my workflows and building software and getting out my marketing blog posts and everything. And it's going to save me a whole bunch of time and allow me to put that time back into prompting the machine again to give me more stuff. So it's like a promise of salvation as doublespeak in many ways. I
Yeah,
feel.
but you have to just, work hard enough for 40 or so years, and then maybe you get salvation in retirement. Maybe. We'll
Maybe,
see.
yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, we will have to see. 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. Yeah, the promise of salvation, the promise of being able to alleviate us of a whole bunch of effort and time doing things that we probably don't enjoy doing, so that we can spend that time doing other things, whatever those might be. That's a beautiful promise. That's a beautiful promise of salvation from menial labor that we've heard, I guess, throughout the human story many times before,
Mm.
and yet here we are
But also
internalizing.
salvation from critical thinking and planning, right? Because
Yeah.
who needs that in these end times? Just let the machines, powered machines, do all the thinking for you, right?
Yeah, tell me what to eat for dinner. Um,
Tell
how
me
to
what to
cook it
think.
too.
Yeah, and tell me what to think, what to
Yeah.
feel. How do I feel about the absurdity? How do I feel about all the news that's going on and the craziness and our rights being stripped away, the funding to education and science being cut? Tell me, machine, how do we feel about that? Right?
Yeah, how do I make sense of a world paradigm in decline? Dear ChatGPT, tell me, please.
Yeah, it would be easier, right, if we were just machines, if we didn't think and feel all of these things and just focused on our outputs and recharging our dead batteries and so on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that internalization of the machine and machinations of the world that we've internalized, and yeah, reflective in language, the way we use things like recharge as if we are fucking batteries that need to be recharged over the weekend, so that come 9 a.m. Monday morning we can be
We
back
can work happy.
being happy again, productive little bees in the beehive, so that dear Bezos, the Queen, can continue to, I don't know, create cock rockets to space. I don't know.
Yeah, joyrides, space joyrides,
Yeah. So
as a spectacle. Yeah.
there's lots of promises of salvation that we get in a lot of the marketing messages that we see, whether it's in Zoom or Canva or Microsoft's suite of tools in Windows, or OpenAI's general purpose tools to do everything from help you with your strategic business planning to helping you plan your itineraries for your holiday with your family. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and all at once at the same time. While we're feeling exhausted from role playing as machines for our whole lives, I feel particularly growing up in a Western educated, industrialized, rich and somewhat quasi democratic country like Australia, myself and you obviously in Europe, we're role playing them as machines, and I guess, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to role play as a machine? What do we mean by that with this question?
Yeah, I think what we were saying about the internalization of this machinery focused metaphors, language, and the whole industrialized logic. That's what we mean, because not only are we treated as if we're machines in like workplaces and by other systems, right? Just form filling, checkbox ticking machines. But we also internalize that view of ourselves and the way we talk, even to ourselves, of, I need to, need to earn my rest. I've worked enough this week, so I finally deserve to recharge, like the language we use to speak to ourselves and think of ourselves. Or even when we do get sick or something like that, we think of that mechanistic view of the human body. Oh, I just need to fix this bolt or whatever, this little part, and it will be fine, without looking at the human body as a whole system, complex ecosystem, organic ecosystem. So because we are constantly being treated as machine in our daily lives, especially when it comes to work, obviously, we internalize that and start acting like that in our personal lives as well. From scheduling, seeing also relationships as transactional, as something to be scheduled, put in the calendar, meetings, time box, meeting at a certain time, ending at a certain time because we have other obligations. We are always on a schedule, just scheduling more tasks, whether in professional or personal lives.
So where does all that come from? Like the I guess the quick diagnosis of like why we have these mechanized mental models that we've internalized so much in our lives. I think, if we just take a portion of this that makes us feel like we're cogs in a larger machine and pieces in a larger machine, industrialized logic that has, really influenced a lot of the last century of, everything from education to politics to media, to, production of goods and services. It's formed the fabric of so much of our lives, and you take something like education and, it's a production line. It's a production line to produce a bunch of workers, from whether we're talking about
workers.
Yes, the certified workers that have certain skills that can operate the machinery of the system. And yeah, we become that in some way. We internalize that, throughout our lives. And we're obviously, we're not that. We're not machines. We're not mechanized things, where, we could see ourselves, as rather than machines. We're cells in a larger kind of, complex biological organism, a super organism on the surface of the planet. So I think there's all these parts of our world and our world views that have shaped mental models that aren't just, it's not just mental, like it's in our infrastructure, right? Isn't it? Yeah. It's like, it's in our tools, like it's in our ways of understanding things. It's in our relationship to time, this tick-tock blocks on the, and tyranny of the clock, tyranny of the chronos time.
And our built environment as well. Right? We live in these square spaces because that's it's easier to plan, easier to build, like cheaper to plan, to build these squares instead of, for instance, circular structures, which is how we naturally live for thousands of years, right? And where we actually feel better. So it's all about ignoring the body, the human, and just focusing on what can be scaled, optimized, standardized to make it easier, right? So it's not a new phenomenon. It's been a trend in this Western world, the weird world, for a couple of centuries. It started obviously with the story of separation of, we are separate from nature. Men above nature, those stories. And obviously then we get the Industrial Revolution and Taylorism and all of those stories that basically transform human bodies into just cogs in a machine. And now I feel that whole story and shift is coming for knowledge work and our creativity. So it's just a progression of this story of separation and optimization of output, where it's not about caring about the work you do, the craftsmanship, the love you put into an artifact you build. So we've done that, for instance, with the physical world, and now we are basically, with all these AI tools, we are attempting to do something similar for our imagination and creativity, basically. But it also shows how much of our knowledge work is actually made for machines, and how easy it is for machines to excel in a lot of the knowledge work that we do, which is not knowledge, but it's checkbox ticking work, right?
Yeah, I think the transition to like automating knowledge work, and it depends on the type of knowledge work, I guess. Like knowledge work is such a broad term that we use for people that are interacting with information and knowledge and trying to make sense of things and make meaning from things, qualitative data, quantitative data, put that into context and do something with it, synthesize, analyze and synthesize, and then kind of repeat these cycles. And I think some people have very checkboxy type, very standardized kind of workflows, and they go through very distinct processes that can be automated pretty easily, I think, by machines. Because the to paraphrase Buckminster Fuller, we've created inspectors and inspecting inspectors that are creating machines for inspectors, and that's the large part of it. But there's portions of work where it's kind of messy. People's workflows are messy. I think about a lot of my work, and like I would have to monitor all the different types of things that I do, think out loud, describe how I do things, and have a machine try and make sense of that. And I don't think it's going to produce the same quality of output at all.
Yeah, but your assumption is that we care about the quality of output.
Yeah.
Where I think we're finding that in most places, they just want the job done, right? The checkbook ticked, and they don't care about the messy human process and the creativity that emerges when you are given that freedom to play, even in a standardized environment, right? So I think that's what because even if you look at the the automation of production of like things like furniture, like, is the furniture we mass produce in factories better than the ones made by real craftsmen people who had the knowledge, spend time getting to know the material they're working with? It's not, right? And you can feel it. So it's the same, I think, with the knowledge work, because we just want the good enough, the average, not the messiness. I don't think that that's actually being rewarded, because we're constantly there's a shift of looking for things that can be scalable. Like, that's also the kind of ventures that gets funded. How does it scale? Like, that's where we want to put our money into, not in.
Yeah, it's definitely the dominant paradigm, the hegemonic forces that we've got around output and production of some type of value or things that we value, that it's, done is better than kind of perfect, and it's not about the quality and the love and the energy that's put into it. Did it get the job done in a current system? And that's a question of values. Like, yeah, it's like, what do you care about? If you're working in an organization, and that organization is a publicly listed company, and it has a fiduciary, its directors have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value, then that type of logic and values is going to permeate most of the decisions that get made in that organization. With some outliers in terms of humans kind of pushing back against that, which does tend to happen. Tensions kind of play out in organizations around profit-driven motives all the time, as we know. But yeah, you're right that, for the most part, it's like, doesn't care, like, produce an average output. And I think we only care when shit goes wrong
Yeah.
with that output, right? It's like all of a sudden, this software got built and yeah, look, it fucking works. And then all of a sudden, it breaks and it doesn't work anymore. And that means the company, I don't know, loses customers, or then it's like the company cares. Or the people in the company that are responsible for the operation and running and success of the company will tend to care, because it impacts the metrics and outcomes that they care about. But yeah, the automating of our time. I mean, back to thinking about our role playing as machine, and like this internalization of that way of thinking about the world, and it partly stems from, yes, the separation from nature and our relationship to things, reductive ways of thinking about the world, particularly with the scientific method and reducing things to the constituent parts so that you can isolate variables and test hypotheses and all these things that have, it's like that meme space, that mimetic space is really influenced, and like, we're part of it, like that's internalized as a result into our bodies. And we struggle to, because you can go, well, no, I care about craftsmanship. I care about getting a product where I know who's made it, where I know where the stuff has come from. And some people do, right? Like, I think there is this, the smaller portion of, trade in goods and services and how people relate and interact where, people do care. But it's not the dominant way of doing things, which tends to shape a lot of how we think and feel. So it's...
Yeah, but we also cannot afford to pay for that quality.
Yeah.
And especially if we want to live in a world where we can afford, to buy so many things, most of us cannot afford to buy so many things at that level of quality, which is kind of a bind, right? So if we were willing to live a life with fewer things, we could possibly afford more things of good quality. But then you're surrounded by all these messages and telling you buy, buy, buy. We're increasingly buying the cheap stuff, right? Because we can no longer afford the quality. Because we live in a system, right? We also have to look at the metrics and the goals of the system. It's GDP, constantly infinite growth, always increasing, always spending.
Yeah, I mean, why do things cost so much? Like, why? This is getting into like economics and questions of money and what that is. But yeah, it does become this kind of bind where it's like, well, yeah, in the way that the current economics of our system work is that you're paying and this is a labor theory of value, a Marxist labor theory of value, that, the cost of a product is a reflection of the labor inputs into that
Yeah.
product or service. And because labor, uh, humans increasingly start demanding more for their time, and this is kind of industrial revolution and the pushback and tension from an emergence of unions and unionism and people demanding more pay and not to be exploited by the elite mercantile capitalists and industrial capitalists at that time. You get this increase in the cost of things because of the demand of labor. Now, that's one theory of, I guess, of the value of things, but value in many ways is also kind of arbitrary in terms of when
Yeah.
we account for the value of something in terms of monetary terms, because it's kind of it's a shared story around the things that we value. Now, we don't value the externalities of, I don't know, a steak. You talk about like buying a steak and you go, okay, well, what does the price of that reflect? Well, here in Australia, we subsidize our beef industry. So the government pumps a whole bunch of money into supporting the beef industry, cattle, industrial slaughter of animals, to produce, an export beef. But that, like $40 a kilo for, some high quality steak. Now, true cost accounting would probably put that kilo of animal meat at thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
in terms of the current valuation of time and inputs that go into things. So we are in a bind with the monetary systems and economic systems in how we account for value, which is partly why we paid more, for a high quality thing, because, most people sell their time.
Yeah, but it's also, we're not, in the prices, we're not accounting for also the ecological cost, and putting that in quotes, because obviously, how do you quantify having a livable planet? Like, how do you put a price on that, right? Once we fuck things so sufficiently, like none of it is gonna matter anymore. But yeah, we're definitely not paying the true cost of things. Probably even the digital services we use do not represent their impact. And we know, for instance, all the data centers use up a lot of water, land that could otherwise be used for food production or housing. Just a couple of ideas here. So yeah, we're not really paying the true costs, and we're seeing that with a lot of even AI products, right? They offer their services for free, just to get customers, just to get data. We're not paying the true cost, because if the true cost was being charged, none of us could afford it. And we're seeing that obviously now with all the discussions on tariffs and all of that. And there's been like a calculation on the true price of an iPhone if it were produced in the US, I think, right? And it was like $30,000 or something. Like an insane price, but yeah, like that is how much stuff would cost, or even more if we also
Did
took
true
the
cost
real,
accounting.
yeah, in the
Ecological impact.
Exactly.
Because the cost of actually addressing ecological damage over time doesn't get factored into any of the accounting of our products and services.
Yeah.
Because that's an externality, and it becomes a problem of the commons.
Yeah.
And we're in those binds. in many ways. So like, I mean, more broadly, you then go, well, these current systems, these current ways of accounting for value, they're just fundamentally fractured and broken, and they're not working. They're not working in meeting human needs, meeting our needs as part of the larger biosphere on this planet, and that is also reflected of us continuing to role play as machines in this system. And like we're not unable to disentangle ourselves from that in many ways. I mean, I'm struggling to disentangle myself because I still need to do all this stuff and pay bills and pay taxes and like make the school lunches so that kids can go to school and be a cog in the machine on the production line in the education system. And it's like well, yeah, I want to. I don't know if I had the money, I'd go and I don't know, try and buy a property with a group of people and live off grid. But like, I don't know, that's not the solution either. It's kind of like it's. I think full withdrawal from the system. Don't frown upon people that do that. I mean, I desire to do that in many ways. But it's also figuring out how to disentangle ourselves from the system while living, I don't know, where I am in an urban place in Sydney, in a major capital city, and in a country like Australia. Is an important contribution in some ways, but I'm struggling. I'm struggling to figure out how to disentangle myself from that in so many ways, apart from, the smaller stuff, the rituals, the shifting of our relationship to time, remembering that I'm not a machine, and just reminding myself of that as frequently as possible, going outside barefoot on the grass, speaking to the garden and my dogs, playing with my children and being silly when possible, looking up at the moon in awe and wonder after we do our full moon gatherings, and that I think those subtle things, the smaller things in aggregate is how we disentangle. And, because it's not like just a snap. We snap back to the same when we try and, get away from things too quickly, like building habits, creating new rituals, and being differently, learning to be human, as apart from role playing as machines, as we do in so much of our lives, takes intentional effort and time.
Yeah. But it's like, yes, we're so immersed in these stories of like machinery, whether it's thinking that we need to earn our rest, whether it's constant consumption because that's what we've been told. And that is also, in essence, acting like a machine, right? Trying to get an upgrade to your life with buying some additional stuff. And it's, for instance, it's interesting now with the recent trend with, of course, all the terrorists and everything going on. And we've been talking about the Chinese factories reveals that are happening on TikTok, where basically, Chinese suppliers for luxury brands are revealing how things actually get made in China, even when they maybe slap a "Made in France" label when they actually sold the final label in France after the whole product has actually been made in China. But it's interesting that, still the reaction of most people is not to just say, oh, fuck this system, right? But it's like, oh, I can finally buy cheaper stuff. I can finally get the luxury items that the rich have been buying for cheap, right? So that's still buying into that role play of a machine that you need some luxury bag item, something to fulfill your purpose here on Earth as a good machine in the system of consumerism, right? So it's hard getting out of those stories, and I'm not obviously blaming individuals because that's how we've all been brought up and indoctrinized, and we've been consuming this propaganda all our lives and bought into these stories. But it is hard, right? We are all trapped in this. And it's interesting, even the rich people who seemingly have success are trapped in these stories. Like nobody is really winning until we buy in this story and continue acting like machines. So what does it take, right, to snap us out of it?
Yeah. I mean, it's the entanglement in conspicuous consumption where we feel like we have to have all these things, keeping up with the Joneses and status symbols to convey things, because they tap into deeper parts of our biopsychosocial selves, to want to belong and communicate like the value that we've been able to create. It's like whether it's clothes that we wear, or the brands that we wear, the bags that we have, the shoes that we wear, the cars that we drive, the suburbs we live in, all of that it conveys meaning in a larger part of our cultures and society. And it's hard to it's hard to disentangle ourselves from that, because again, it's so encoded in the way that we've been brought up. We are the story, like down to our bones. We are that story, but we're also at the same time not that story, because that is just a story that we've chosen in some way, consciously, unconsciously, to embody. So we can embody these, a different story, the citizen story, the Earthian story, seeing ourselves as part of Earth, rather than separate from it. And to some degree it is, it's like, are we, it's rewriting that story, crafting that story in a different way that does take time, and time is a big part of it as well. It's the concept of time, as we've spoken on previous podcasts, quite a lot over the past many moons. That our relationship to time has to change. It's like giving yourself time to rest. Like, I'm a body. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Like from being part of this machine, and sometimes even being part of the machine, calling it is a machine, to extract value and like take from the earth and produce more shit that we don't need, and just rest, be weird.
But the other aspect of time is that we also keep acting like we have all the time in the world and we're gonna live forever, which is also interesting, right? So we also live and act like, I can take care of my human needs later. Now I have to hustle, I have to make more money, buy more things. So it's usually when we come to the end of our time here in these organic vessels, that we rethink how we've been living our life, right? So we know that death or near-death experiences often force people to kind of rethink how they've been living their lives, and deathbed regrets, obviously, super fascinating, because nobody regrets not work. Like, I wish I had worked more. I wish I had bought more stuff. Like, nobody regrets that, right? It's all like, oh, fuck. I spent all my life working, buying stuff, and I'm left with nothing, and I don't have love in my life, and those things. So we have an interesting relationship with time. At the same time, we are afraid to take time to rest, but we also act as if we had all the time in the world, and we can live forever, which is, I guess, the same way a machine operates. Like, a machine does not think of its own mortality. And how much time does it have? At least as far as we know. Like, I don't know what's ChatGPT is thinking about these things. Bit of joke, they probably don't.
Yeah,
right? So it's
depends on the model
this.
you ask.
Yeah, but it's an interesting relationship with time and like this. As machines, we are also kind of focused on the present task that the system, the powers to be, asked us to perform, whether it is making money, buying more things. But when we also look at the relationship we have with our machines, like our devices, we treat them as obsolescent and we replace them as soon as they get a bit slow. So what is that saying about us, right? Because do we perceive ourselves the same way, as replaceable, as only worthy as long as we keep producing, working?
Yeah, it's how do we value ourselves? How do we value time and have a relationship to it? And you're right that we tend to get stuck in the Chronos time and in super routinized, ritualized work that's part of this larger machine, living blocks of time. And I think to myself, I thought to myself today, I'm like, when is a time, a moment in my story over the past, let's just say the past 20 years, where I've felt like liberated from those constraints. And it was a period where I was traveling in Mexico and I'm walking around barefoot 99% of the time, in the jungles and like just I don't know, being a hominid um, in the jungle. That's actually and it's like time. Like I'm not wearing a watch. I'm not it's like the sun comes up, the sun goes down. Um, eat when you're hungry, laugh when you're happy, cry when you're not, like, feel pain when you're hurt. It's just, it's just being. And, so those periods now, that's obviously living like that is very different, but our relationship to time is also part of what we perceive and observe. So time goes by subjectively quicker.
Yeah.
When we're stuck in routine, get up, do the same fucking thing over and over again, week by week, day by day, month by month, year by year, and all of a sudden, you're 79 and you're at the end
I
of your
wish I had lived, right?
yeah, I wish I lived, right? It's just it's and it's such a common theme that
Yeah.
has played out over the past 150 years at least, in our kind of industrialized world that we're living in. And that pattern, when we bring in novelty and when we break free of the clock, and I reflected on it today. Yes, that was a time when I was in Mexico, but it's also when I wake up in the morning and I don't have a time-based like thing that I need to do, when it's just live, like, just be, and, spontaneous, go for a drive with the kids, it's like what you might say, when you're on a holiday, in many ways. And that's when there's obviously less stress, there's less cortisol in my bloodstream. It's kind of, creating less oxidative stress as a result of, how I'm handling things, and, obviously much healthier. But yeah, our relationship to time is a big part of this, like living by the TikTok tyranny of the clock. Um, breaking free of that, in some way, even if in small portions, in whatever ways we can, I think is really powerful, to stop role playing as machines.
So how do you think we do that? Because like especially if you have children to take care of, cats, look at you hungry.
Yeah.
You can just fuck off to Mexico, or go on a retreat to India and explore your spirituality for a month, right? Like
Yeah.
we have dependencies, and things and people keeping us where we are. So how do we make that move, right?
Yeah, and that's as soon as you have, other beings that rely upon you and your relationship with them. You know, your kids, your cats, I don't know, your plants, your dogs. You know, your family. You know, your coworkers. You know, you're part of the system. You're part of like all these things. So yeah, it is in the small stuff. I mean, you know, finding those little rituals and things to do where you break free from it a little bit, where you uh, orient yourself. Particularly, I feel in the morning, you know, and this is for me, like that first moment when I'm aware that I'm awake, how I respond in that moment matters a lot. You know, and I do have a quite a strong ritual routine when I wake that I remind myself, you know, and note whatever it is I'm grateful for, you know, and that's quite powerful for me. It's been very helpful for me. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know. There's not going to be stress in the morning and getting the kids to school and whatnot, but you know, those smaller things I feel do matter a lot in starting to shift away from seeing yourself as a machine. Like every moment where you feel that urge to, I don't know, whether it's from the buzz on the phone, the haptic feedback that you might get from a notification, just pause, take a deep breath, responding to it and being more mindfully aware of like how we're entangled in the machine, I think enables us and gives us power to kind of you know, shift to a different story of like being human. You know, what are the things that you do, Alia? Like, you know, whether it's
Yeah, I think it's different for every person, right?
Mm.
And I think it's can be maybe feel like inaccessible when we give like general advice. Because for instance, for me in the morning, like my brain like doesn't do rituals and gratitude. Like it just I cannot, like, I like the idea. I can never get into it. Like my morning brain just isn't like that. But I try to start my mornings as slow, but I'm not gonna do my gratitude. Like I never, like that's not my morning brain. The cats are very demanding when it comes to their food. But I think we can all find different ways that work for us in being more mindful about how we do things and finding those parts of our days or the things that we do that work for us, right? So it doesn't have to be morning. It doesn't have to be meditation or a specific ritual. So for instance, what I find helpful for me is just like paying attention to the language I use, even with myself. Like, like those, trying to catch those thoughts. Oh, I've really been productive today. I earned my rest. Like I can rest now. Like trying to catch those thoughts and reframing that. I mean, it sounds a bit of like cognitive behavioral therapy here, but if that works for you, whatever. But it is like, how can I think about these things differently, but also changing the feeling in my body, right? So it's not just the thoughts, but it often when you start with the thoughts, the embodied feeling can follow. But I think what has helped me be more human and show up and cut some of my addiction to this machinery stories, narratives, is also finding my own inner peace, right? And finding a way towards myself, either through therapy, making life changes, and starting to really feel what it is that I want instead of what the stories tell me I should be wanting and should be having in my life. So letting go, questioning every should, right? That pops in our head. Oh, I should live like this, I should be doing this. Like those are, I think, if we start catching those things, those thoughts, those stories, and questioning them, like spending time with them, like, is this really what I believe? Is this what feels right for me in my body? And if not, then try to find something that works for you, whether it's, getting some therapy, whether it's meditation, breath work, whatever works. And it's not going to be one single solution for everyone, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's one single solution for everyone at all. I think there's patterns that are important, so that what you're referring to in terms of the internal dialogue that we have, and the shoulds and the stories and catching yourself and being mindful, like that's, there's a set of patterns that play out. We've internalized the patterns of the machinery, and it plays out like, this way of relating to ourselves in the world, that's about like feeling obligated to do certain things. Like catching yourself at those moments really helps you to be aware of those internal drivers that you've, a lot of the times it's been there for your whole life, perpetuated across generations, things that your parents might have said or teachers or whatever it might have been, that we tend to internalize, and then there's the regulating of the nervous system, like whatever works for you, whether that's dancing or, I've had to ritualize so much of my life because of my, my neurospiciness, and otherwise I'm just fucking haywire. And when I had kids, I realized like I seriously need to like have structure and, because it's not healthy for the kids to not like, when I'm a bit everywhere, that's not healthy for them. They do need stability and structure, particularly early on in their lives. And then also, so you've got patterns of that, being aware of yourself and like that internal dialogue, that is definitely helpful. And you then notice, right, the time stuff, you notice the language you use, you start noticing, shit, where did that even come from? Like, and when you start doing that, you realize how internalized all these
Whose
things are.
thoughts is that, right?
It's like, where the fuck did that come from? And sometimes you'll pause and you reflect, and doing that introspection is really, really powerful, to understand, well, what motivates you, what moves you, what moves the creative energy and force as that you have as a being. But it takes, that's also a habit, the CBT aspect of like catching yourself when you're thinking, they are quite helpful techniques, because they reveal patterns, and then you become aware of like the pattern of, your body and where it is and how it feels and what you think and how those interact with each other. And that, it's like a reprogramming essentially of your nervous system, over time. That tends to work, as a general pattern for most people to get away from, disentangle yourself from the machine. Otherwise, you're gonna likely have to do it when you have a near-death experience, or when you. Yeah, unfortunately, most people tend not to have that level of introspection until they're on their deathbed.
Yeah, but I'm gonna now catch this conversation in, like, we've been approaching maybe this question also in role playing as machines and thinking of ourselves like, how can I upgrade myself, kind of way. So here's a reminder, right?
Is it an upgrade, or is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
the
restoring.
language you've been using, right? And we've been talking. Yeah, this is how I fixed myself. This is how I upgraded my story, right? Like change the operating system. So like what we haven't really talked about yet is the importance of relations and relationality and doing it with other people. Because, for instance, a lot of, what is really helpful for me is also the conversations I'm having with you and other people where we talk about these things, share really our feelings and sense make, because like if you're doing this alone, it's really hard. So I think, maybe even starting with having conversations with somebody, like maybe that's even more important than, trying to rewire yourself. Like obviously some people might have different preferences, but what I'm saying, it's very helpful to feel yourself as a part of something, whether it's like a community, a family, friends that you can involve in this process, right? Because that's what sets us apart from machines. We're not individual units. We exist because and with others, entangled in others. So it's also, hard to change the story if everyone around you like is fully buying into the machine role play and sees nothing wrong with it. So this also, the importance of communing and also, but it's also, of course it you can enact change by, showing up as human and in a way give permission to others. So sometimes all it takes is for somebody to open this conversation and start questioning these things to invite other people in. But I think, doing it with other people, like you said, walking in nature, feeling the trees, like not just humans, but more than human life as well. That's a really important part that often gets missed in conversations like this.
Yeah, the relationality. I mean, first and foremost, like the reason the patterns of that we've talked about, it does so much of the field of personal growth and like personal growth hacking and all that stuff and upgrading yourself and optimizing yourself and like, where a lot of like those ideas of, morning rituals and stuff do tend to like come from. And that's a reflection of the colonization and the mechanization of everything. But your relationship with yourself is really crucial because that helps you to orient how you have relations and aware of your relationships with the garden, like with the trees, like with your children, with your loved ones, in the conversation, sticking my head over the fence to talk to my neighbor, and doing it with people. It's like this idea that when we fire together, we rewire together. And that's an individual thing. Like when neurons fire at the same time, they wire at the same time, so they'll start forming these more dense neural networks through our nervous system and our brain. But when we do it together, it's like singing or dancing in the choir and relating to each other and, having rhythms together in the same way, we start changing our nervous system. We start changing our actual neurophysiology, and I think that, doing it together, you're making it's a really good point that's actually a crucial part because we're social. We're part of a larger web of life. Doing it, re-becoming, and re-being ourselves. Reifying ourselves with that web of life in those relationships matters a lot. That's the I don't know, the re-entanglement, even re-entanglement in a different way.
This entanglement in the machine story was not like each of us made a conscious choice. Oh, that's how I'm going to think, right? I'm going to buy into the story. It's because we are born into this story and because other people keep reinforcing it. Even, you and I, even though we pay attention, we fall into the trap of like, what is an individual to do, right? And so it's going to take also collective communal effort to disentangle this mess, right? Just as we got in here that way. And it's also worth noting that we know from also looking at history that when, in times of greater economic uncertainty, fear, and just distress, there's a societal shift towards more conservative behavior, to, like, there's this urge to fit in, use more AI tools, more AI companions, just, keep your head down, keep being more productive, don't make a noise, right? Because you don't want to draw attention to yourself, because who knows, they might knock on your door next, right? So there's acknowledging what we also know tends to happen in times like this, when things get really uncertain. There's this, obviously, a drive for self-preservation, to protect yourself, to protect your family, and we get more close, right? And especially in the age when we're being sold these AI companions, this might mean we will act even more like machines. Just go to your job, use the AI companion for this and that, and just produce more emails and presentation with AI and code that's, just like, don't question it, keep your head down. So it's, in some way, right, what we're talking about is becoming even more difficult, but at the same time, like, recognizing this and recognizing that it's going to take more people together, which is why finding community is so important, even more so than ever, right?
Yeah, particularly when you're able to find community where, it's safe to cry, it's
Yeah.
safe to grieve, like you feel human and less like a machine in these times where, yeah, when people are, uncertainty increases, ambiguity increases, things seem more complex, and there's more concern about, being able to provide for your immediate needs. Then, like, people do get conservative, they get afraid. Like, it comes from fear, and that's a normal biological response when we're dealing with uncertainty. And it's a perception thing, right? It's really just a lot of that's to do with our, like, the stories that we're told, that we read, that we, but also the recognition that all these things are happening at the moment,
Yeah.
and everyone's kind of feeling it, when we're able to co-regulate in a safe space with others. We're able to show up better as a, as we are human, for each other.
Yeah.
And that's when we are able to play a different role, not as machines, as communal beings,
Yeah.
that we are.
Like, being stubbornly human, and noticing the human in other people, like, even in professional environments. Like, you recently told me you're in a meeting and you noticed the person was, like, just exhausted, and you told him, right, mate, looks like you really need some rest.
Yeah.
Right, and checking on each other, and also being a bit more forgiving and kind in these times as we feel all these pressures, right, and not expect other people's to act like machines. I mean, we're, yeah.
The mimicking and the modeling, like,
Yep.
if you're in a space, or in a situation, and people feel you do it, it's like when you say the thing that everyone's thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, that does it present, this is where you get social contagion and, like, the positive deviance in a space, in a given environment. But it's the same in, like, workplaces, or in a conversation, or even in the family environment, or friendship circles, or whatever it is. When you do a behavior that is reflective of what people would like to be able to do, but you step up and you do it, like, I'm taking time off, like, I'm exhausted. I feel like you're exhausted too. Like, I know you feel it. You look at it. Like, seriously, come on. Let's, like, take a break to, like, this is not, we're not a machine. We are not machines. Yeah. And when people feel that, and it's like, it's messy, and it's kind of, I don't know, when you do it in a light-hearted way and just kind of sometimes have a joke of it about it, um, Yeah, that models the behavior, right? And we mimic and we model. That's the social learning. In terms of the way that we actually develop a lot of our understanding of the world is through modeling and mimicking the behaviors of others, and that's how norms, social norms, basically formalize and then become institutions. Is through that modeling and mimicking of behavior. So, yeah,
Yeah.
show up.
I guess that's why we're doing this podcast, right? It's an opportunity for us to say the weird shit that we hope a lot of you are thinking. Maybe you're not afraid to say out loud. Maybe you don't have people with whom you can talk about things like this. So this is also, I think, our way of doing this, and maybe inviting all of you who are listening to this in giving you permission to say things like that in your personal relationship, work relationships, as well, right?
Yeah. Come along to a full moon gathering if you can and laugh with us, sometimes cry with us. Like when heavy stuff comes into the space, like be human. But yeah, like you have permission to do that. You are human. And learning to be it. I mean, this podcast is, we're real. It's unscripted. These are conversations. We talk about stuff that I wish more people would be talking about. And yeah, that is it's modeling and mimicking. I mean, I reflect on. I'm wrapping up like the MBA course at the moment, leading business transformation in the age of AI. As much as the title of that course makes me want to vomit a little bit. Yeah, you and I, Alia, we approached that in a different way, and just thinking about this, that going in with this kind of goal of like what are the types of leaders that the world need right now? They kind of do need people to show up and model and mimic the behaviors that say the things that need to be said, that everyone knows need to be said, but haven't been getting said, particularly in business. And and yes, that's about the navigating complexity and making sense of things and dancing in the paradox and in betweenness of knowing that, like, yeah, you got to kind of be a leader. You've got, I don't know, shareholder value and all this stupid shit that you got to factor in, but you also got to show up and be human because you work with other humans. Yeah, you've got your agents that are kind of, AI agents that are now being integrated into your teams. But you have to show up and be real with people. And the more and more that people do that, we in this course, we collectively, you and I in shaping some of the things and me delivering it and working, with students, I tried to model and mimic the behaviors that I know are needed in leadership in organizations, and the students started modeling and mimicking it, right? And all of a sudden you created a very different set of conditions for people to show up as human. And I think the more that we can do that, like, if you're listening to this, the more that you can do that in your life, as small as it might be, even if it's just in, your small circles, your family, your friends, and maybe in your workplace, we shift away from role playing as machines. We shift to being human.
And also, if we don't do this modeling and leading as being fully human, we have to remind ourselves what's at risk and what kind of leadership behavior we are otherwise exposed to right now. And it's of mostly men, children, emotionally immature, scared, and then just like doing things for their ego and spreading fear. And we see that social contagion happening, right? Because we have currently leaders that act like immature children and are just like pointing fingers, like not willing to accept any responsibility or whatever, and just like shifting the blame to somebody else, you see more people behaving like this, because that's, you know, the kind of behavior that currently gets modeled and amplified, repeated all over, and it rubs off on us. So if we don't show up with an alternative of acting like mature, caring, loving humans, like, we're pretty much fucked. Like, at a certain point, we're all just gonna start like acting like you know who, and then we even use their names. So yeah.
Yeah, it's as above, so below, right? Like particularly like when we live in this hierarchical world, and that is the risk, right? Particularly as things start breaking down, and the behaviors and the patterns of behaviors that we engage in every day become us. And if we're mimicking and modeling the behaviors of those types of so-called leaders, which I think is, that is happening. It's kind of amplifying in many ways, selfishness and narcissism and power games that people are playing, and when things do fall apart, that's the type of behaviors that people will exemplify, and that's what they will be expressing, because that's actually the patterns in their nervous system. It's become their physical body because of the way that they get wired, and that's not that's a pretty Mad Maxy type fucking world that, like, I don't want to live in. That's for sure. And it's it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. So we have the option of being human as a radical act in these end times, and offer an alternative for ourselves and each other, right? It's not just for ourselves as like a selfish reason to be more evolved as a human, but it's also doing it for each other, for those we care about, and people we don't even know yet.
And for those unborn, future generations.
Exactly.
Yes. Be more radically human.
Yes, that's a good one to end on. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening and pathfinding with us. If you enjoyed this exploration, share it with friends to inspire further discussions. Leave a review, comment, or send us your thoughts at community@thethics.co. We are always happy to hear from you, and we're also extremely grateful to our paid subscribers on Substack who are able to support our work financially. We hope to continue inspiring collective pathfinding towards better tech futures, and every bit of support, whether financial or algorithmic, helps to keep us going. We invite you to embrace the lunacy of tech and the world with smiles and love by subscribing to the Pathfinders newsletter and joining our next full moon gathering. We sync our monthly reflections and gatherings to the lunar cycle as a reminder of our place in the universe and a commonality we share across time zones and places we inhabit. Pathfinders podcast will return during the next waning moon. Until then, give love that one more chance, and be mindful about the seeds of intention you plant and the stories you tell. There's magic in both.